Good evening and welcome back to the cab. Pour yourself some coffee, settle in, and let's roll west into the kind of night that only Nevada knows how to throw at you. Tonight we're heading into the Silver State, where the highways stretch longer than your patience. The silence is thicker than fog, and every mile marker feels like it's counting down to something you can't quite name. Nevada. Just saying the word out loud feels like letting air out of your lungs after holding your breath too long. It's a place that doesn't apologize for being empty, doesn't try to fill the spaces between things. Out here, the desert owns the night, and the night owns everything else. And if you're driving through after sunset, when the stars come out like a million truck stop lights scattered across the biggest parking lot you've ever seen, well, you start to understand why some folks never want to leave. I've rolled through Nevada more times than I can count, crossed it east to west, north to south, taken every lonely back road that promised a shortcut and delivered an adventure instead. And every single time, it's different. The desert never tells the same story twice. Sometimes it's quiet as a prayer. Sometimes it howls at you through your cracked window. And sometimes, late at night when you're the only headlights for 50 miles, you swear you can hear it thinking. This isn't the Nevada of neon and showgirls, though we'll tip our hat to Vegas and Reno when the moment's right. No, tonight we're talking about the other 99% of the state, the part that doesn't show up on postcards. We're talking about highways that disappear into nothing, towns that came and went in the blink of a century, and skies so dark and clear you can see straight through to whatever's out there watching back. Nevada's got more ghost towns than living ones, more secrets than answers, and more empty miles than any other state in the lower 48 has a right to claim. It's a place where the past sits right next to the present, where a 120-year-old bank building crumbles next to a brand new Tesla charging station, and nobody thinks twice about it. The highways here don't just connect places. They're the places. Highway 50, which some magazine writer once called the loneliest road in America, thinking he was throwing shade, but Nevada turned around and made it a badge of honor. Highway 375, the Extraterrestrial Highway, where more people claim to see UFOs than anywhere else in the country. And honestly, after midnight out there, you start to wonder if maybe they're onto something. Interstate 80, cutting across the top of the state like a scar, following the old immigrant trails, the railroad, the telephone wires, every generation's version of heading west. And then there's the quiet ones, the state routes that barely show up on maps, the dirt roads that fork off into nothing and everywhere all at once, the kind of roads where you better know what you're doing because out here, no services next 100 miles isn't a warning, it's a promise. I remember my first run through Nevada. I was young, maybe too young to be pushing an 18-wheeler across the country by myself, but nobody asked and I didn't tell. Came in from Utah on I-80 around 3 in the morning, and for the first hour I thought maybe I'd taken a wrong turn and ended up on the moon. Nothing but darkness pressing against the windshield, nothing but the white line unreeling in front of me like a prayer I was following west. Then the sun started coming up, and that's when Nevada showed me what it really looks like. Mountains appearing out of nowhere, valley floors that went on forever, and everywhere that particular shade of brown and gold and silver that doesn't exist anywhere else on Earth. The Spanish called this place Nevada, snow-covered, because they saw the mountains in winter and figured that was the whole story. But the real Nevada, the one you find on the highways at night, that's something else entirely. That's silver moonlight on sagebrush, silver stars reflected in ancient lake beds, silver silence that fills up your head until you can't remember what noise sounds like. Tonight we're going to drive these roads together, you and me. We'll start on Highway 50, that loneliest road, and work our way through every strange and beautiful corner of this state. We'll stop in towns that time forgot, or maybe towns that forgot time. We'll look up at skies that make you feel small in the best possible way. We'll soak in hot springs that bubble up from somewhere deep in the Earth's memory. and we'll listen to stories about flying saucers and gold rushes, and the kind of solitude that either breaks you or makes you whole. Because Nevada isn't about the destinations. Never has been. It's about the space between them, the hours of driving through nothing that somehow becomes something. The way the desert gets inside your head and rearranges your thoughts until you realize you've been thinking in a straight line your whole life, and maybe that was the problem. So check your mirrors, adjust your seat, and let's roll. The night's young, the road is long, and Nevada's waiting out there in the dark, patient as stone, old as starlight, ready to show you what silence really sounds like when you're finally ready to listen. Highway 50 cuts right through the belly of Nevada, west to east, 400 and some miles of two-lane blacktop that a Life magazine writer back in 1986 decided to call utterly desolate, and warned drivers they'd need survival skills just to make it through. The state tourism folks looked at that article, looked at each other, and probably said something like, "Well, hell, let's make that official." And they did. Welcome to the loneliest road in America, where the lack of people is the whole point. Now, I need you to understand something about loneliness, because most folks use that word wrong. They think lonely means sad, isolated, cut off from the world in a bad way. But out here on Highway 50, loneliness isn't a problem to be solved. It's a feature. It's what you came for, whether you knew it or not. The road starts or ends, depending on which way you're rolling, near Sacramento, but it doesn't really become the loneliest road until you cross into Nevada at South Lake Tahoe. That's where civilization makes its last stand before surrendering to the high desert. From there, you've got Carson City, which is the state capital but feels more like a well-kept secret. Then you're into it, real Nevada, the kind that doesn't pull punches. First major stop is Fallon, about 60 miles east. It's bigger than what comes after, sitting at maybe 9,000 people, with a naval air station that trains fighter pilots. You'll see jets screaming overhead sometimes, breaking the sound barrier just to remind the desert that humans can make noise too. But Fallon's also got sand dunes, Sand Mountain Recreation Area, where people bring their dune buggies and ATVs and make their own kind of noise. There's this contrast in Nevada that never stops surprising you. Ancient silence meeting modern roar, and somehow both of them feeling completely natural. After Fallon, things get real. The next town is Austin, and that's 110 miles away. No gas stations, no rest stops, no phone signal. Just you and the highway and the basin and range country that Nevada does better than anywhere else on Earth. I rolled through this section one night in October, late enough that frost was starting to glitter on the sage brush when my headlights caught it. Moon was about 3 days from full, hanging up there like it was nailed to the sky, and the shadows of the mountains went on for miles. I hadn't seen another vehicle for an hour, maybe more, and I was starting to get that particular kind of highway hypnosis, where the white line becomes the only real thing in the world. Then my CB crackled to life. Voice came through, older guy, sounded like he'd been driving since before I was born. He said, "Anybody awake on 50 tonight?" Just that. Just checking if he was alone out there or if someone else was riding the same ribbon of asphalt through the dark. I keyed the mic. "Eastbound at mile marker 73, you out here too?" "Westbound," he said. "Just past Austin. Wanted to hear a human voice before the silence got too comfortable." We talked for maybe 10 minutes while we closed the distance between us, swapped stories about loads and destinations, complained about the weather coming in from the Pacific, the usual driver talk. Then I saw his lights cresting a hill ahead, and we passed each other going opposite directions, each of us flashing our brights in greeting. And just like that, I was alone again, his voice fading on the CB as the distance stretched back out between us. That's Highway 50 for you. Moments of connection in an ocean of solitude, and both parts matter equally. Austin sits in a little valley, clinging to the side of a hill like it's holding on for dear life. Used to be a silver mining boom town back in the 1860s, And for a brief moment, it was the second biggest city in Nevada after Virginia City. Now it's home to maybe 200 people, give or take, depending on who moved away last winter and who came back when the weather warmed up. But Austin's got character. It's got Stokes Castle, this weird three-story stone tower built by a mining magnate in 1897 who wanted to give his daughter a place to paint. It's got the International Hotel, which has been serving travelers since 1863 and makes the best biscuits and gravy you'll find between Salt Lake and Sacramento. And it's got this spirit that refuses to die, this stubbornness that says a town doesn't have to be big to matter. The local folks will tell you about the Pony Express, which came through here back when 10 days from St. Joseph, Missouri to Sacramento was considered lightning fast. They'll show you where the station ruins are, stone foundations that still mark where horses got swapped and riders got a moment to catch their breath before heading back into the wilderness. And if you ask nice, they might tell you about the silver that's still up in those hills, waiting for someone crazy enough to go looking. East of Austin, you cross Hickeson's summit at 6,600 feet, and then you drop down into another valley. This is where the landscape really opens up, where you can see the curve of the earth in the distance, where weather systems become visible as entities, dark masses moving across the basin like they've got somewhere to be. Eureka comes next, another 77 miles down the line. It calls itself the friendliest town on the loneliest road, which is either ironic or perfect, depending on how you look at it. Population around 600, with a gorgeous opera house built in 1880 that still hosts shows. There's something deeply Nevada about an opera house in a town of 600 people in the middle of nowhere. It's like the whole state refuses to accept that isolation means giving up on beauty or culture, or the things that make life worth living. The Owl Club bar in Eureka has been there since the mining days, and walking into it feels like stepping through time. Dark wood, tin ceiling, old photographs on the walls of men with pickaxes and women in long dresses standing in front of buildings that aren't there anymore. You can get a cold beer and a hot meal, and you can listen to the stories from whoever's sitting at the bar, because everybody's got stories out here. It's currency stories, worth more than silver ever was. From Eureka to Ely is another 78 miles, and this is where Highway 50 starts climbing and dropping over mountain passes, 17 of them before you hit the Utah border. The highest point on Nevada's stretch of Highway 50 is Connors Pass, 7,729 feet up, where you can see for 100 miles on a clear day, which is most days. Ely's bigger, maybe 4,000 people, and it's got the Nevada Northern Railway Museum, where you can ride a steam train and remember when the whole country moved at a slower pace. It's also the gateway to Great Basin National Park, which barely anybody knows about despite having some of the oldest trees on Earth, bristlecone pines that were already ancient when Rome was founded. But here's the thing about Highway 50 that the magazine article got wrong. It's not desolate. Desolate means empty in a dead way, barren, lifeless. Highway 50 is none of those things. It's full of space, sure, full of quiet, but also full of life that knows how to survive where survival isn't guaranteed. Pronghorn antelope that can run 55 miles an hour. Golden eagles riding thermals 2,000 feet up. Sagebrush that smells like the entire American West compressed into one scent when rain hits it. And then there's the sky. Oh man, the sky. During the day, it's this impossible blue that goes on forever, the kind of blue that painters spend their whole lives trying to capture and never quite get right. At night, it's something else entirely. Nevada's got some of the darkest skies in the country, least light pollution, and on Highway 50 at midnight, you can see the Milky Way like a river of light flowing overhead, like someone spilled stars across black velvet and forgot to clean them up. I've pulled over on 50 more times than I can count, just to get out of the cab and stand there looking up. You start to feel small in a good way, like your problems and worries and deadlines and bills are nothing compared to the age of the light hitting your eyes, light that left its star before humans figured out how to write things down. The Nevada tourism people created this thing called the Highway 50 Survival Guide, tongue-in-cheek response to that magazine article. It's a little passport that you can get stamped at stops along the road, and if you get enough stamps, you get a certificate that says you survived the loneliest road in America. Sounds corny, maybe, but there's something beautiful about a state that turns an insult into an invitation. That says, yeah, it's lonely out here, and that's exactly why you should come see it. Because loneliness, the good kind, the kind you choose, it does something to a person. It clears out the noise. It gives you space to think, to remember who you are when nobody's watching, when there's no one to perform for. On Highway 50, in that long stretch between towns, you're not anybody's employee or boss or spouse or parent. You're just a person moving through space, and the desert doesn't judge you for it. It doesn't care who you are or where you're going. It just is, and for a little while you get to just be too. There's this moment that happens, usually around the third or fourth hour of driving Highway 50, where everything shifts. Your shoulders relax, your jaw unclenches, your thoughts stop racing and start flowing, and you realize that loneliness wasn't the warning, it was the gift. That's the real secret of the loneliest road in America. It's not about survival. It's about remembering how to be alone with yourself, and finding out that's not nearly as scary as you thought it would be. It's about discovering that sometimes the best company you can keep is your own, and sometimes the best conversation is the one you have with the silence. I've driven a lot of roads in my time behind this wheel. I've seen spectacular scenery and boring stretches, cities that never sleep and towns that barely wake up. But Highway 50 through Nevada is different. It's honest in a way most roads aren't. It doesn't promise you anything except exactly what it is. A long, quiet journey through the kind of country that makes you think about things bigger than yourself. And maybe that's all any of us really need sometimes. A long road, a quiet night, and space enough to let our thoughts catch up with us. Now let me tell you about Highway 375, which runs diagonal through the middle of Nevada's empty quarter, and which the state officially designated as the Extraterrestrial Highway back in 1996. This wasn't some promotional stunt, at least not entirely. People have been seeing strange things in these skies for decades, and enough of them were serious enough about it that the name just stuck. The highway runs 98 miles from Crystal Springs to Warm Springs, cutting through Lincoln and Nye counties, and passing within spitting distance of the most secret military base in America, Area 51. Now, I'm not here to tell you whether I believe in flying saucers or little green men. That's between you and whatever you saw, or think you saw, or swear on your mother's grave you saw after 3 hours of driving through the dark with nothing but static on the radio. But I will tell you this. There's something about that stretch of road that gets inside your head. Maybe it's the military jets from Nellie's Air Force range screaming overhead, testing aircraft that won't be declassified for another 20 years. Maybe it's the way distance works funny in the desert, where something that looks 10 miles away might be 40, and your brain starts playing tricks trying to make sense of it. Or maybe, just maybe, there really is something up there watching us back. Rachel, Nevada is the closest town to Area 51, if you can call a collection of maybe 50 people a town. It sits right in the middle of Highway 375, and it exists almost entirely because of its proximity to that secret base. The whole place has leaned into the alien thing hard, and why not? When life gives you government conspiracy theories, you open a bar called the Little Elan. I stopped there one night, must have been 2, 3 in the morning. Place was still open. Bars in Nevada don't really close, they just dim the lights and wait for the next customer. There were maybe 6 people inside. Couple of locals playing pool, a trucker working on his 3rd cup of coffee, and a guy who looked like he'd been waiting his whole life for someone to ask him about what he saw back in 1997. The walls are covered with photographs of strange lights in the sky, newspaper clippings about unexplained sightings, patches and stickers left behind by visitors from every country you can name. There's a framed photo of the famous black mailbox that used to mark the turnoff to the back gate of Area 51 before it got replaced with a more boring white one. People used to leave messages in that mailbox, notes to aliens, jokes, marriage proposals, drawings. The owner would collect them all and keep them in albums behind the bar. I ordered a beer, needed something cold after hours of desert driving, and the bartender, who'd probably heard every UFO story ever told twice, asked if I'd seen anything unusual on the way in. I told him the truth. Just darkness and stars and the occasional coyote eyes reflecting in my headlights. He nodded like this was exactly what he expected and said, "Give it time. The desert shows you what you're ready to see." Area 51 itself, officially called Groom Lake or Homey Airport depending on who you ask, sits inside the Nevada Test and Training Range, which is about the size of Switzerland and completely off-limits to civilians. The government didn't even acknowledge its existence until 2013, despite it showing up in satellite photos and having been an open secret since the 1950s. They've tested the U-2 spy plane there, the SR-71 Blackbird, the F-117 stealth fighter, and who knows what else that still hasn't been declassified. But the secrecy, the restricted airspace, the signs warning that use of deadly force is authorized, all of that just feeds the mythology. Bob Lazar came forward in 1989 claiming he'd worked at a facility near Area 51 called S4, where the government was supposedly reverse engineering alien spacecraft. His story has more holes than Swiss cheese, but it captured the public imagination in a way that facts never could. And look, I'm just a truck driver. I'm not qualified to say what the government is or isn't hiding in that desert. But I can tell you that when you're driving Highway 375 at 2 in the morning, and you see lights moving in ways that don't match any aircraft you've ever seen, when they dart and stop and change direction at angles that shouldn't be possible, well, you start to understand why people get obsessed with this stuff. There are dirt roads that lead up to the perimeter of Area 51, and people do drive them carefully because you can get close enough to see the guard stations, the sensors, the warning signs, but not too close. Security patrols in white trucks watch from hilltops, and they will come down to intercept you if you cross the line. They're not aggressive, usually just firm. They'll explain that you're at the boundary of restricted government property and suggest, strongly, that you turn around. Most people do. A few push it, and those folks usually end up with a citation and a very long conversation with Lincoln County Sheriff's deputies. I talked to a local once who'd lived near Rachel his whole life, worked ranching and odd jobs, seen the area change from complete nowhere to tourist destination. He told me that back in the 50s and 60s, they'd see lights in the sky all the time, hear booms that rattled windows, watch aircraft that looked like nothing he'd ever seen in magazines or on TV. Said his dad once saw something hovering over their cattle dead silent, casting a beam of light down that was bright as noon. Cattle were spooked for weeks after. Did he report it? I asked. The rancher just looked at me like I'd suggested his dad report that water was wet. To who? Government already knew what they were doing out there. They were the ones doing it. That's the thing about Area 51 and the Extraterrestrial Highway. The conspiracy and the reality got so tangled up over the years that nobody knows where one ends and the other begins. Maybe that's intentional. Maybe the best way to hide a secret is to bury it under 1,000 fake secrets until nobody knows what's real anymore. But the people who live out here, who drive these roads every day, they've got their own relationship with the mystery. They don't need to prove anything to anyone. They know what they've seen, what their neighbors have seen, what gets passed down through families like ghost stories, except they swear it's not folklore. It's just facts that don't fit comfortable narratives. One night I was rolling through around midnight, and my CB picked up a conversation between two other drivers, one heading south on 93, the other coming west on 375. They were talking about a light they could both see, moving erratically over the mountains to the east, stopping and starting, too bright to be a star, too maneuverable to be a plane. "You seeing this?" one of them asked. "Been watching it for 10 minutes, the other replied. "Doing things that don't make sense." They tracked it for maybe 20 minutes, reporting its movements to each other like sports commentators, until it suddenly shot straight up and vanished. Just gone. No fade out, no gradual disappearance, just there 1 second and not there the next. Then silence on the CB for a long moment before one of them said, "Well, hell." "Yep," the other agreed, and that was it. They went back to talking about load weights and fuel prices, because what else was there to say? You see something you can't explain, you acknowledge it, and you keep driving. That's life on the extraterrestrial highway. The state leans into the weirdness with good humor. There are signs along 375 warning of alien crossing zones, showing a classic flying saucer silhouette. The little travel guides they print up are full of tongue-in-cheek warnings about intergalactic hitchhikers and suggestions to watch for unidentified flying objects. It's like the whole state looked at this bizarre situation and decided that if you can't beat them, you might as well sell them a t-shirt. But underneath the kitsch, there's something genuine. People really do see things out here they can't explain. Maybe it's experimental aircraft. Maybe it's atmospheric phenomena. Maybe it's something else entirely. But the desert keeps its secrets, and Highway 375 runs right through the heart of those secrets, inviting you to look up and wonder. I remember driving through one clear night, radio giving me nothing but static, just me and the road and the biggest sky I'd ever seen. And I thought about all the things humans don't know yet, all the questions we haven't figured out how to ask. Thought about how 100 years ago, if you'd told someone we'd split the atom and walk on the moon, they'd have called you crazy. Thought about how much we take for granted that would have been magic to our ancestors. And I thought about how the desert, this massive empty space, seems to invite those kinds of thoughts. It strips away the noise and the distractions and the comfortable certainties, and it makes you look at the sky and ask, what else? What else is out there? What else don't we know? I didn't see any UFOs that night. Didn't see anything unusual at all, unless you count the perfection of the stars and the way the Milky Way painted a path across the black. But I felt something shift inside me, some small opening of possibility, some willingness to admit that the universe is stranger and bigger than I'll ever understand. That's what the extraterrestrial highway does to you if you let it. It doesn't matter if you believe in aliens or think the whole thing is a tourist trap built around military secrecy. What matters is that, for 98 miles, you're driving through country that reminds you how much mystery is still left in the world, how many questions we haven't answered, how much we still have to discover. And sometimes, late at night when you're the only vehicle for 50 miles, you might just look up through your windshield and wonder, is something up there looking back? Rachel's got a small RV park now, a gas station that opened recently, and always that little Elaine with its alien burger and its collection of stories from thousands of visitors who came looking for answers and left with better questions. It's a strange place, beautiful in its weirdness, proud of its isolation, serving as a beacon for everyone who ever wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, we're not alone in this vast universe. As you drive away from Rachel, heading either direction on 375, the lights of the town disappear fast, swallowed by the desert dark. And then it's just you again, rolling through the night with nothing but your thoughts and the road and the endless sky above. And whether you saw a UFO or just stars, whether you believe or just wonder, something about that drive changes you a little, opens you up, reminds you that certainty is overrated and mystery is a gift. That's the extraterrestrial highway for you. Not answers questions, not proof possibility, not tourist traps, genuine strangeness that refuses to be explained away. And maybe that's exactly what we all need sometimes. A reminder that the universe is bigger and stranger than our maps and our certainties, and that out there in the Nevada desert, under skies darker than most people ever see, anything might be possible. Nevada's got more ghost towns than living ones. More than 600 of them scattered across the state, each one a story that started with hope and ended with abandonment. The silver runs out, the gold dries up, the railroad moves on, and suddenly the town that was somebody's future becomes nobody's past. But the desert preserves things, keeps them suspended in time like insects in amber, and so these ghost towns remain, waiting for someone to remember them. Rhyolite is the crown jewel of Nevada's ghost towns, the one that photographers and artists and curious travelers seek out more than any other. It sits just outside the eastern entrance to Death Valley, about 4 miles from the little living town of Beatty, and even in death it's spectacular. The story starts in 1904 when two prospectors, Frank Shorty Harris and Ed Cross, found high-grade gold ore in the hills they named Bullfrog, on account of the greenish rocks with gold chunks that looked like the back of a frog. Word spread like desert wildfire, and within months there were multiple camps springing up across the Bullfrog mining district. But Rhyolite, founded in 1905, became the center of it all. And I mean it exploded into being. Within 6 months, 5,000 people had arrived. Within 2 years, the population hit 10,000. There were 3 railroads, 50 saloons, an opera house, a stock exchange, electric lights, concrete sidewalks, telephone lines, and water mains. The Cook Bank building, still standing in ruins, was 3 stories of imported marble and mahogany, costing $90,000, about $2.5 million in today's money, just to build. This wasn't some rough mining camp. This was a real city, a place people thought would rival San Francisco. Steel magnate Charles Schwab bought the Montgomery-Shoshone mine in 1906 and invested heavily in infrastructure. For a brief, shining moment, Rhyolite was the future. People brought their families, opened businesses, built schools and churches. The Rhyolite Herald newspaper kept everyone informed about ore strikes and social events and plans for expansion. And then it all fell apart. The ore wasn't as extensive as everyone hoped. The San Francisco earthquake of 1906 disrupted supply lines and caused an economic panic that dried up investment capital. By 1910, the mines were closing. By 1912, the population had dropped to 1,000. By 1916, the power company shut off the electricity and pulled down the lines. The last train left in 1914. The post office closed in 1913. And by 1920, only 14 people remained. What happened next is what happens to most ghost towns. Salvagers moved in and stripped the place for parts. Wood, metal, fixtures, anything useful got hauled away to other towns. Whole buildings were disassembled and rebuilt elsewhere. The Miners' Union Hall became the town hall in Beatty. 2-room cabins got moved and reassembled into larger homes. Parts of many buildings went into constructing a school, but some structures were too solid to move, too expensive to disassemble, so they stayed. The Cook Bank building, that magnificent 3-story temple to capitalism, remains as a shell, its concrete walls still standing though the roof and floors are long gone, windows empty as eye sockets. The railroad depot is still there, beautifully preserved, with Rhyolite spelled out in the original letters on the facade. The school building stands in partial ruin, and then there's the Bottle House. Tom Kelly, a miner who saw what was left after the saloons and bars closed, had an idea. Why not build a house out of all these empty bottles? So he did. Used about 50,000 beer, whiskey, and medicine bottles, set them in concrete mortar, built himself a 3-room house in 1906. It's the oldest and largest known bottle house in America, and it still stands, somehow more permanent than most of what was built with traditional materials. I visited Rhyolite one morning in early spring, when the desert was doing that thing it does after rain where everything that looked dead suddenly remembers it's alive. The light was clear and cold, the kind of light that makes colors sharp as knives, and the ruins of the town stood against the Bullfrog Hills like they were posing for one more portrait. There's no one living there now, hasn't been for almost a century, but Rhyolite isn't empty. It's full of absence, which is its own kind of presence. You walk down what used to be Golden Street, the main drag, and you can almost hear the echo of boothiels on wooden sidewalks, the clatter of freight wagons, the sound of someone playing piano in a saloon that's now just a foundation outline and scattered bricks. Near the southern entrance to the ghost town, there's the Goldwell Open Air Museum, a sculpture park where Belgian artist Albert Schukowski created The Last Supper in 1984. Life-sized ghost figures arranged like Da Vinci's painting, made from plaster-wrapped fabric over wire frames. It's haunting and perfect. These spectral figures gathered for a meal in a town where everyone left a long time ago. But Rhyolite's just the most famous. There are ghost towns everywhere in Nevada if you know where to look. Goldfield, which hit 20,000 people during its boom and now has maybe 300, with the massive Goldfield Hotel standing empty and allegedly haunted on the main street. Berlin, preserved as a state park, where you can walk through buildings frozen in 1911 and then go see ichthyosaur fossils in the rocks nearby, because this whole area used to be underwater 200 million years ago. There's Gold Point, which has been semi-revived by a handful of people who bought the whole town and turned it into a quirky destination where you can rent cabins and have a beer in the old saloon and listen to the silence between the stars. There's Belmont, with its gorgeous two-story brick courthouse still standing, built in 1876 when Belmont was the county seat, and people thought it would last forever. There's Manhattan, which had 2 different booms and 2 different busts, and still has maybe 30 people living there who aren't ready to give up on it yet. Each of these towns tells the same basic story, but the details are always different. Different minerals, different timing, different personalities that shape the place. But they all share that arc: discovery, rush, boom, decline, abandonment. The American dream compressed into a few decades and then left to weather in the desert sun. I spent a night once parked near the ruins of a ghost town whose name I never learned. It was too small to make it onto any maps, just a handful of collapsed buildings and a cemetery on a hillside. I walked up to that cemetery at sunset, read the names on the headstones that were still legible. Mary Josephine Halloran, born 1847, died 1889, beloved wife and mother. Robert Chen, 1851–1892, gone but not forgotten. Children who died before their second birthdays, men killed in mining accidents, women who didn't survive childbirth. All of them buried in this lonely place that they'd come to seeking fortune or new starts or just somewhere to belong. Standing there, as the sun went down and the shadows got long, I thought about how much hope must have filled this place once. How many dreams were carried up this valley on the backs of wagons and the feet of people willing to risk everything for a chance at something better. And I thought about how quickly those dreams can turn to dust, how fragile even our most permanent-seeming accomplishments really are. But here's the thing about Nevada's ghost towns that gets lost sometimes in the romance and the photography. They're not really dead. Not entirely. The desert has preserved them, kept them from rotting away like abandoned places do in wetter climates. And people still come to them, still walk their streets and try to imagine what they were. In that way, they're still serving a purpose, still telling their stories to anyone willing to listen. There's something honest about a ghost town. It doesn't lie to you about permanence or success or the inevitability of progress. It says, flat out, here's what happened when people tried to build something in the middle of nowhere. Here's how long it lasted. Here's what remains. Make of that what you will. And maybe that's why they fascinate us. In a world that's always pushing forward, always building newer and bigger and more permanent-seeming things, ghost towns are a reminder that nothing lasts forever, that boom times don't last, that the things we think are solid and eternal might be gone in 100 years, leaving nothing but foundations and memories. But they're also beautiful. There's something about those empty window frames looking out at mountains that haven't changed, about doors opening onto rooms where no one's walked for a century, about the way sunlight falls through collapsed roofs onto floors where people once danced and argued and fell in love and made plans for futures that never arrived. It's melancholy, sure, but it's also strangely peaceful. The desert reclaims these places slowly, gently. Sagebrush grows up through floorboards. Lizards sun themselves on window sills. Birds nest in rafters. The wind does its patient work, eroding and smoothing and returning everything to dust. And someday, maybe 100 years from now, maybe 1,000, there won't be anything left but some scattered bricks and the stories people tell about the towns that were here once. But for now, they remain. Rhyolite and Goldfield and Berlin and Belmont and all the others, named and unnamed, famous and forgotten, still standing in the sun, still casting shadows, still waiting for the next visitor to walk their streets and wonder what it was like when these places were alive. That's Nevada for you, a state that doesn't hide its failures or its ghosts, a place where the past sits right next to the present, crumbling but not quite gone, teaching anyone who pays attention that everything ends but stories last a little longer than buildings do. Now let me tell you about one of the strangest places in Nevada, which is saying something. The Black Rock Desert, a prehistoric lakebed in the northwest corner of the state that's flat as a billiard table and bigger than some small countries. Most of the year it's empty, silent, blindingly bright under the sun. And so desolate it's been used for land speed record attempts because there's literally nothing to hit for miles. And then, once a year in late August, 70,000 people show up and build a temporary city called Black Rock City, throw a week-long party called Burning Man, create massive art installations, burn everything down, clean it all up, and disappear, leaving the playa looking like nothing ever happened. I've never been to Burning Man myself. Hard to take a week off when you're hauling freight on a schedule. But I've driven past the Black Rock Desert plenty of times on Highway 447, and I've talked to enough people who have been, and I've seen the aftermath, and I've got to say, there's nothing else quite like it. The playa itself is a remnant of ancient Lake Lahontan, which covered much of western Nevada until it dried up about 9,000 years ago. What's left is a perfectly flat expanse of dried lake bed, hard-packed alkaline clay that can support the weight of vehicles when it's dry, but turns into soup when it rains. The playa stretches for miles in every direction, and driving on it is surreal. There are no landmarks, no features, just flat white nothingness extending to distant mountains that shimmer in the heat haze like mirages. Burning Man started small back in 1986 on a San Francisco beach, but after some conflicts with the authorities, it moved to the Black Rock Desert in 1990, and that's where it's been ever since, growing from a few dozen people to a small city that temporarily becomes one of the largest settlements in Nevada for 1 week a year. The event has evolved into this weird combination of art festival, social experiment, and temporary community, based on principles that sound simple but play out in complex ways. Radical inclusion, radical self-reliance, radical self-expression, communal effort, civic responsibility, gifting, decommodification, participation, immediacy, and leaving no trace. In practical terms, this means you show up with everything you need to survive for a week in the desert: water, food, shelter, shade. Because there's nothing to buy there except ice and coffee at center camp. No vendors, no transactions, no advertising. If you want something, you have to bring it, make it, or receive it as a gift from someone who brought extra. It's a cash-free society for 1 week, running on the principle that humans can build community without commerce. People create camps with themes. Everything from bars serving elaborate cocktails to workshops teaching skills to performance spaces to shade structures where you can rest. And the art installations are wild. Massive sculptures, interactive pieces, things that shoot fire or play music or invite you to climb them or walk through them, or just stand and stare. All of it gets built on the playa, displayed for a week, and then most of it gets burned in various ceremonial fires throughout the week, culminating in the burning of a massive wooden figure called the Man on Saturday night. The logistics of it are staggering. They build a temporary airport on the playa for small planes and helicopters. They create a grid layout of streets with names like Esplanade and concentric circles radiating out from a central plaza. There's a radio station, medical facilities, fire safety teams, Department of Public Works crews building infrastructure. For 1 week, Black Rock City has a functioning government, services, and cultural institutions, all created from scratch and dismantled before Labor Day. And here's the kicker. When it's over, they clean up everything. Every single piece of trash, every bit of debris, every tire track. They comb the desert with line crews picking up tiny pieces of what's called MOOP, matter out of place, until the playa looks untouched. The Bureau of Land Management, which manages the area, inspects afterward and has consistently rated Burning Man's cleanup as thorough. Now, the event's not without controversy. The town of Rhyolite, population about 200, gets overwhelmed every year by the traffic and the dust and the influx of people passing through. The local roads take a beating. Some longtime residents resent what Burning Man has done to their quiet corner of Nevada. And there are legitimate questions about sustainability, water usage, and whether a temporary city really qualifies as leave no trace when you're bringing in diesel generators and thousands of vehicles. In 2023, the event made international news when an unusual late-season storm dumped rain on the playa, turning it into a muddy morass that trapped all 70,000 attendees for several days. Roads turned into slop, vehicles got stuck, and everyone had to hunker down and wait for the ground to dry out enough to drive on. Instead of chaos, though, people reported an unexpected communal resilience, sharing food, water, shelter, making the best of an uncomfortable situation. The event became something different that year, less about the party and more about survival and community in the face of nature's indifference. The playa doesn't care about your art or your principles or your carefully laid plans. When the weather turns, you're just another group of primates trying not to get stuck in the mud. And there's something humbling about that, something that brings people back to reality in a way that's probably healthy. I drove past the Black Rock Desert in October one year, a couple months after Burning Man had come and gone, and I pulled over to walk out onto the playa. It was utterly silent except for the wind and absolutely empty as far as I could see in every direction. Hard to believe that 70,000 people had been there creating chaos just weeks before. The desert had reclaimed itself completely, showing no evidence of temporary cities or art installations, or the brief human explosion that happens there every August. Standing in that emptiness, I understood something about why people go. It's not just the party or the art or the freedom to be weird. It's the contrast. It's building something from nothing in the most inhospitable place you can find, proving that humans can create community anywhere if they're willing to work together, and then watching it all disappear back into the desert silence. It's a reminder that everything is temporary, that gathering together matters more than what you build, and that the desert will outlast all of us. The Black Rock Desert represents something essential about Nevada. It's a place that allows for extremes, that gives you space to do things that would be impossible anywhere else. You want to build a temporary city in the middle of nowhere? Sure, go ahead. You want to drive a rocket car across a dry lakebed trying to break the sound barrier? Be our guest. You want to disappear into silence so complete you can hear your own heartbeat? We've got endless miles of that. But the desert doesn't coddle you. It doesn't make things easy. If you show up unprepared, if you don't respect the conditions, if you think you can impose your will on this landscape without consequence, the desert will teach you otherwise. People have died on the playa, exposure, accidents, medical emergencies too far from help. The heat can kill you, the cold can kill you, the isolation can break your mind if you're not ready for it. That's the deal Nevada makes with you. We'll give you freedom and space and emptiness that goes on forever, but you'd better know what you're doing. You'd better be self-reliant, resourceful, ready to handle whatever comes. Because out here, there's no one to save you but yourself. Burning Man, whatever else you want to say about it, honors that deal. It asks participants to be radically self-reliant while also being radically communal, a contradiction that somehow works because the desert demands both. You have to take care of yourself, and you have to take care of each other, because those are the only two choices that lead to survival. And when the week is over and everyone leaves and the desert returns to silence, the playa sits there unchanged, eternal, indifferent, waiting for the next group of humans to show up and try to make meaning in the emptiness. Because that's what humans do. We fill voids with stories and community and art and ritual. We can't help ourselves. And Nevada, with its vast, empty spaces, gives us room to do that in ways that crowded places never could. The Black Rock Desert will still be there long after Burning Man becomes a footnote in history, long after all of us are gone. It's been there for thousands of years, and it'll be there for thousands more, flat and white and silent, the ghost of an ancient lake, hosting brief moments of human activity, and then returning to the timeless patience of desert places. And maybe that's the real lesson. Build your temporary cities, create your art, gather your communities, but remember that all of it is temporary against the permanence of the landscape. The desert humbles you, reminds you of your place in the scale of time, teaches you that everything you make will eventually return to dust. But that doesn't make it meaningless. If anything, the temporary nature of it makes it matter more. Because we only get this one brief moment to be alive, to create, to connect with each other, before we too return to the elements that made us. So we might as well gather in the desert and build our temporary cities and dance under the stars and remember, for 1 week out of the year, that we're all in this together, all temporary, all making meaning in the vast emptiness as best we can before the silence reclaims us. Hidden in valleys and canyons across Nevada, bubbling up from deep underground where the earth's heat still remembers creation, are hot springs. Natural pools of water heated by geothermal activity, rich with minerals, perfect for soaking after a long day on the road. Nevada's got more than 300 of them, more than any other state, and they range from commercial resort pools to completely undeveloped springs in the middle of nowhere. I'm going to tell you about a few that matter to people who drive these roads at night. Spencer Hot Springs sits off Highway 50 between Austin and Eureka, up a dirt road that winds into the Toyib Range. It's not much to look at from a distance. A couple of galvanized metal stock tanks fed by hot water from natural springs, sitting in open sagebrush country with views of the valley below. But it's become something of a pilgrimage site for travelers on the loneliest road because of what happens when you soak there at night. You're sitting in this metal tub full of hot water, steam rising around you, and above you is nothing but sky. No light pollution for 100 miles, which means the stars come out like you've never seen them unless you've spent real time in the desert. The Milky Way becomes three-dimensional, a river of light flowing overhead. Shooting stars streak past so frequently you stop making wishes because you'd run out of things to wish for. And sometimes, if you're lucky, you'll see satellites tracking across the black, or the International Space Station making its silent passage, a bright point of light moving faster than any star. There's something about being in hot water under cold desert air while looking at stars that have been dead for millions of years before their light reaches you. It puts things in perspective. Your problems get smaller. Your sense of time gets bigger. You remember that you're a temporary arrangement of matter that got lucky enough to be conscious for a little while. And right now, in this moment, soaking in this spring under these stars, that's enough. I stopped at Spencer one night in December, cold enough that frost was forming on my windshield. The drive up the dirt road was slow and careful, and when I got there, there was one other vehicle, an old Subaru wagon with Colorado plates, but I didn't see anyone around. I stripped down in the freezing air and slipped into the water, which was almost too hot at first, then perfect. After maybe 20 minutes, a voice came from the darkness. "Beautiful night." Scared me half to death until I realized someone was in the other tub, had been there the whole time, quiet as a ghost. "Sure is," I agreed, once my heart stopped racing. "Drove from Denver," the voice said. Female, middle-aged, sounded tired in a good way. "Needed to see stars again. City lights, you forget what the sky really looks like." We talked for maybe an hour, two strangers soaking in separate tubs under the stars, sharing stories about where we'd been and where we were going. She was a nurse taking time off between jobs. I told her about life on the road. We never saw each other's faces, too dark, and neither of us felt the need to turn on flashlights. Just voices in the darkness, two people passing through the same moment in the same place. When I finally got out, dressed, and drove back down the mountain, I realized I never got her name, and she never got mine. And somehow that felt right. Spencer Hot Springs is a place where you can be anonymous, just another human seeking warmth and stars and a moment of peace. Soldier Meadows Hot Springs is way up in the northwest corner of the state, remote even by Nevada standards. You have to really want to get there, driving miles on rough dirt roads through black rock desert country. But the springs are spectacular, multiple pools of different temperatures, some cool enough to dip in briefly before moving to the hotter ones, surrounded by grass and willows fed by the constant flow of water. The area was once a cavalry post, back when the Army was establishing control over the Western territories. Soldiers stationed there probably soaked in these same springs, grateful for hot water after patrols through the desert. Now it's managed by the Bureau of Land Management, and there's a small campground nearby where you can spend the night. I met a guy there once who'd been coming to Soldier Meadows every year for 2 decades. He'd take a week in September, after the summer heat broke but before winter set in, and just camp and soak and read and think. He told me the springs had saved his life once, after a bad divorce left him thinking dark thoughts. He'd come out here intending to drive into the desert and not come back, but something about the place, the warmth of the water, the endless sky, the simple fact of water flowing from the earth, changed his mind. "The springs don't judge," he said. "They just flow. Been flowing for thousands of years, will flow for thousands more." Made me realize that my problems were temporary, but the world keeps going. Gave me permission to keep going too. That's the thing about these hot springs. They're healing in ways that go beyond the minerals in the water or the relief of sore muscles. They're places where the earth literally opens up and offers warmth. And in a state as harsh and unforgiving as Nevada can be, that generosity matters. Ruby Valley Hot Springs, near Elko in the northeast corner of the state, are crystal clear and big enough to swim in. The main pool is maybe 20 feet across, deep enough that you can't touch bottom in the center, and the water is perfectly transparent, filtered by its passage through layers of rock. It's surrounded by mountains that turn gold and red at sunset, and often you'll share the springs with cattle from nearby ranches who come down to drink from the overflow. There's an etiquette to hot springs that's mostly unspoken but generally understood. You pack out what you pack in. You don't wear glass containers that might break. You're respectful of other people's space and solitude. You don't hog the best pools if others are waiting. And you always check the temperature before getting in, because some of these springs are hot enough to cook you like a lobster if you're not careful. Wild horses sometimes show up at remote springs, especially in the northern part of the state where herds still roam Bureau of Land Management territory. There's something primal about sharing a water source with wild horses, being close enough to hear them breathing, watching them watch you with eyes that have never known fences or stables. They're cautious but not frightened, checking out the strange hairless apes sitting in their drinking water, deciding you're not a threat, and then carrying on with their business. The hot springs near Trigo, in the Black Rock Desert region, are so remote and primitive that most people never find them. But those who do discover water so hot it bubbles up from underground vents, pooling in makeshift dams of rocks and mud that previous visitors have constructed. The pools are shallow, the bottom is mucky, and you're completely exposed to the elements with no shelter for miles. But soak there at dawn when the temperature drops and steam rises thick around you, and the sun starts painting the eastern sky in shades of pink and orange. And you'll understand why people go to the trouble. The contrast is what makes it work. Hot water, cold air, vast emptiness, and the strange alchemy that happens when you strip down to skin and step into natural heat rising from the Earth's core. It's primal in a way that nothing modern can match. Our ancestors soaked in hot springs for thousands of years before anyone figured out how to heat bathwater. This is the original version, raw and unfiltered, the Earth's gift to anything willing to find it. I've soaked in maybe a dozen different Nevada hot springs over the years, and each one's different. Some are developed with concrete tubs and changing rooms. Some are completely wild, just a seep in the ground that someone dug out and lined with rocks. Some are social scenes where travelers gather to swap stories and share food. Some are so remote you could soak for days without seeing another human. But they all share this. They're places where the boundary between you and the landscape gets a little thinner. You're not just looking at Nevada anymore. You're in it, literally immersed. The minerals from ancient rock formations entering your skin, the heat from the Earth's mantle warming your body, the desert air cooling your face while your shoulders stay submerged. And in that moment, soaking under stars or watching sunrise paint the mountains, you become part of the exchange that's been happening here for millennia. Water rises, heat transfers, life is sustained. It's simple and it's profound, and it's free for anyone willing to find it and respect it. Some of the springs have been commercialized, turned into resorts with admission fees and regular hours and safety regulations. Nothing wrong with that. Some people need guardrails and showers and places to charge their phones. But the wild ones, the ones you have to work to find, the ones where you might be the only person for 50 miles, those are the ones that change you. Because sitting in hot water surrounded by desert silence under a sky full of stars, you remember something important. You don't need much to be happy. Clean water, natural heat, a place to rest your body, and a sky to look at. Everything else is just noise. Nevada's hot springs are scattered like secrets across the state, each one a small miracle of geology and hydrology, each one a reminder that beneath the harsh surface, there's warmth. You just have to know where to look, be willing to drive the rough roads, and have the patience to sit still long enough to feel the earth share its heat with you. And once you've soaked in enough of them, once you've spent enough cold nights made warm by water that's been traveling through rock for years to reach the surface right where you're sitting, you start to understand what Nevada's really about. Finding comfort in unlikely places, warmth in the middle of nowhere, and moments of perfect peace in a landscape that doesn't promise them, but delivers them anyway to those who seek them out. Interstate 80 cuts across the northern part of Nevada like a scar, following the route of the original transcontinental railroad, which followed the California Trail, which followed the Humboldt River, which followed the path of least resistance across the basin and range country that defines this part of the West. 400 miles from the California border to Utah, mostly straight, mostly fast, and completely essential if you're hauling freight between the coasts. They call it the Cowboy Corridor now, trying to promote tourism, emphasizing the ranching heritage and Basque culture and Western history. And there's truth to that. Elko and Winnemucca and Battle Mountain all have that cowboy flavor, rodeos and buckaroos, and the kind of bars where people know how to take their hats off indoors but choose not to. But for those of us who drive it regularly, I-80 through Nevada is something else. It's a test. It's a meditation. It's 200 miles of nothing followed by a town followed by another 100 miles of nothing. It's where you learn what it means to really drive, to keep your concentration when there's nothing to look at but sage brush and sky, to stay alert when your brain starts finding patterns in the landscape that aren't really there. I-80 follows the Humboldt River for much of its length, that strange Nevada river that rises in the Ruby Mountains and flows generally west-southwest for about 300 miles before disappearing into the Humboldt Sink, never reaching any ocean, just evaporating into the desert like it gave up halfway through. The immigrants coming west in wagon trains called it that damned Humboldt, complained about its alkaline water and the way it meandered through mosquito-infested meadows. But they followed it anyway because water is water, even bad water, and the desert doesn't offer many alternatives. The highway climbs over multiple passes between the valleys. Golconda summit at 5,100 feet between Winnemucca and Battle Mountain. Immigrant Pass at 6,100 feet, bypassing Palisade Canyon. And Pequop Summit at nearly 7,000 feet, the highest point on I-80 in Nevada, where winter storms can shut down the entire interstate for hours or days at a time. Winter on I-80 is no joke. I've been caught in whiteout conditions more times than I like to remember, where visibility drops to nothing and you're driving by feel, trying to keep the rig between the lines when you can't see the lines. Watching for taillights ahead or headlights behind that might give you some reference point. The wind blows snow sideways across the highway, creating drifts that can stop traffic completely. Trucks jackknife. Cars slide into ditches. Sometimes the highway patrol just closes the whole thing down. Chains required at minimum. No travel advised. Sit tight and wait for the plows. I've spent enough nights parked at the Elko truck stop, waiting for I-80 to reopen after a storm, that I know the menu by heart. The Flying J off exit 303, the Pilot over at exit 301, the Loves that opened a few years back, all of them full of drivers in the same situation, drinking coffee and checking weather reports and telling stories about worse storms we've survived. There's a camaraderie that happens in those situations. We're all in the same boat, or the same 18-wheeler anyway, all subject to the same weather and the same weight. The usual competition and hurry melts away. We trade information about road conditions, recommend routes, warn each other about black ice or accidents up ahead. In the restaurant booths and at the fuel islands, temporary alliances form against our common enemy, the Nevada winter. But when the weather's good, I-80 is fast and straight and almost meditative. The speed limit hits 80 miles per hour on certain stretches, and you can run for hours without much changing. The landscape shifts gradually. Mountains rise in the distance, grow closer, you climb over a pass, drop into another valley, mountains appear ahead, the cycle repeats. It's like breathing. Inhale, ascent. Exhale, descent. Over and over, the rhythm of the basin and range. You pass through towns that are barely towns. Lovelock, population about 2,300, once famous for being where Reno couples came to get quickie divorces before Nevada liberalized its laws. Battle Mountain, population around 3,000, which welcomed the honor of being named Armpit of America by the Washington Post in 2001, and threw a parade about it because, hey, at least someone noticed we exist. Carlin, founded as a railroad town in 1868, and still holding on with maybe a couple thousand people, and a strong Basque community that keeps the old traditions alive. The Basque influence in northern Nevada is real and runs deep. Shepherds came from the Basque region of Spain and France starting in the 1800s, bringing their sheep-herding traditions and their cuisine and their language. In Elko and Winnemucca, you can still find Basque boarding houses where the meals are served family-style at long communal tables, mountains of food that seem to violate the laws of physics. Lamb stew, fried chicken, beans, bread, salad, pickled tongue, French fries, all of it coming out of the kitchen in waves until you surrender. I ate at the Star Hotel in Elko once, one of the old Basque places, and I thought I understood hunger until they showed me what my appetite should have been. The meal lasted 2 hours, not because the service was slow, but because you can't eat that much food in less time. Other diners at the table, complete strangers when we sat down, were family by the time we finished, trading stories and recommendations and slapping each other on the back. That's the other thing about the Cowboy Corridor. It's still a place where strangers talk to each other, where the default assumption is friendliness rather than suspicion. Maybe it's because everyone out here is in the same boat, trying to make a living in a harsh climate in small towns a long way from anywhere. Maybe it's because the culture here still values toughness and self-reliance, and the kind of humor that makes hard situations bearable. Or maybe it's just that, when you live somewhere this empty, you learn to appreciate every human interaction because they're rarer than they are in crowded places. I remember pulling into a rest area off I-80 east of Winnemucca one night. Must have been 2 in the morning, just needing to stretch my legs and check my load. Another trucker was there, older guy, doing the same thing. We nodded at each other, that universal trucker greeting, and ended up talking for half an hour about everything and nothing. His kids, my route, politics we disagreed about but could discuss without getting heated, memories of roads we'd both driven and loads we'd both hauled. When we parted ways, him heading west and me heading east, I realized I never got his name and he never got mine, and it didn't matter. What mattered was that moment of connection, 2 people doing the same job in the same empty place in the middle of the night, acknowledging that neither of us was alone even though we were both headed into hundreds of miles of solitude. That's I-80 through Nevada. It's the major commercial corridor connecting the coasts, but it's also intimate in ways that surprise you. It's a working road, not a scenic byway, but the scenery works its way into you anyway. It's fast, but it requires patience. It's crowded with trucks, but empty of everything else. It's the contradictions that make it real. The towns along I-80 are getting by mostly. They've survived mining booms and busts, railroad reconfigurations, changes in traffic patterns as new routes opened up. They adapt. They find ways to keep going. Elko's got a big gold mining operation nearby, the Newmont Gold Strike Complex, which employs thousands. Winnemucca serves ranchers and miners and travelers. Battle Mountain hangs on through sheer stubbornness, and the fact that somebody has to be here to serve the people passing through. And the people passing through, that's us, the truckers and the travelers, the ones who drive I-80 because it's the best way to cross this part of the country. We're temporary visitors, usually in a hurry, but we're also part of the ecosystem. We buy fuel and food and lodging. We leave tips and share stories. We connect these little towns to the bigger world beyond the mountains. In winter, when the storms roll in and shut down the highway, we become something more. A captive audience, forced to stop and spend time in places we'd normally just pass through. And sometimes that's a gift, even if it doesn't feel like it at the time. You eat at a local restaurant you'd have skipped otherwise. You talk to people you'd have never met. You remember that these towns aren't just dots on a map. They're communities full of actual humans living actual lives, and they're glad to have you even if you're only there because the weather won't let you leave. I-80 through Nevada has taught me patience, has taught me that some journeys can't be rushed, that winter comes every year whether you're ready or not, that the desert makes its own rules and you follow them or you suffer. It's taught me to plan ahead, to check weather forecasts, to carry extra food and water and warm clothes even when it's 70 degrees in town because the pass ahead might be completely different. But it's also taught me that reliability matters, that showing up matters, that being the person who gets the load through when everyone else turns back, that builds a reputation and a career. The road tests you. Every winter storm is a test. Every long, empty stretch through the desert is a test. Every decision about whether to push through or wait it out is a test. And when you pass those tests, when you make it through one more time, when you come down off Pequip Summit and see the lights of wells spread out in the valley ahead and know you're through the worst of it, there's a satisfaction that desk jobs can't match. That's the Cowboy Corridor. It's not romantic, not usually. It's work. But it's honest work on a road that doesn't lie to you about what it is. And in a world that's increasingly full of fake things and false promises, there's something valuable about that honesty. The road is what it is. The desert doesn't care about your schedule or your deadline or your plans. And learning to work with that rather than against it, learning to find peace in the rhythm of basin and range and summit and valley, that's a skill worth having. We're coming up on the end of this run now, and I want to talk about something that's harder to explain than highways or ghost towns or hot springs. I want to talk about the silence itself, about what the desert teaches if you're willing to listen to the nothing. Because silence in Nevada isn't just the absence of noise. It's a presence. It's a thing you can feel pressing against your eardrums, filling up the space between stars, settling into your bones like cold or heat or the weight of years. And if you spend enough time in it, if you really let yourself sit with that silence instead of trying to fill it with music or talk radio or the chatter in your own head, something shifts. I've been driving trucks for more than 20 years now, crossed Nevada probably 500 times or more, and somewhere along the line the state got inside me, rewired something in my head, taught me things I didn't know I needed to learn. The first lesson was about scale, about how small you are and how big everything else is, and how that's okay. Actually, more than okay, necessary. When you're out on Highway 50 at 3 in the morning, and you haven't seen another vehicle for 2 hours, and the stars overhead are so thick you could scoop them up with your hands, you start to understand that you're not the center of the universe. You're not even close. You're a tiny point of consciousness moving through a landscape that predates you by millions of years and will outlast you by millions more. And that could be depressing, could make you feel insignificant and pointless. But it doesn't, or at least it doesn't have to. Because there's a strange freedom in insignificance. If you're small and temporary, then your mistakes are small and temporary too. Your embarrassments, your failures, your regrets, they all shrink down to proper size when you measure them against geologic time and cosmic space. I remember one night I was rolling through somewhere near Eureka, had just gotten some bad news over the phone. Won't get into it, but it was the kind of thing that felt like the end of the world at the time. And I was spiraling, you know how it goes, thoughts going darker and darker, feeling like everything was falling apart and it was all my fault and nothing would ever be okay again. And then I topped a rise and the valley opened up ahead of me, and overhead the Milky Way was doing its thing. Billions of stars that have been burning for billions of years, and something in me just released, broke open. Whatever I was worrying about, whatever seemed so important and urgent and world-ending, it just couldn't hold up against that sky. Didn't mean the problem went away. Didn't mean it didn't hurt, but it put it in proportion. Gave me some perspective. Reminded me that the universe is bigger than my personal drama, and that's a comfort, not a dismissal. The second lesson Nevada teaches is about solitude versus loneliness, and how they're not the same thing at all. Loneliness is painful, a feeling of being cut off from connection, isolated in a bad way. But solitude is different. Solitude is choosing to be alone, finding peace in your own company, not running from yourself but sitting with yourself and discovering that's not as scary as you thought. Highway 50 didn't earn the name Loneliest Road in America because it makes you feel lonely. It earned it because it gives you space to be alone in a way that's increasingly rare. In cities, in crowds, even in your own house surrounded by family, you're never really alone. There's always noise, always input, always someone wanting something from you or projecting their expectations onto you. But out there in the middle of Nevada's empty quarter, driving through darkness with only your thoughts for company, you get to be just you. No performances, no masks, no trying to be what someone else thinks you should be. And initially that's uncomfortable for a lot of people. We've gotten so used to distraction, so used to filling every quiet moment with content and noise and stimulation, that sitting with ourselves feels wrong. But if you stay with it, if you let the silence work on you, something shifts. You start to hear yourself think, not the surface thoughts, the running commentary about what you need to do and what you're worried about, but the deeper thoughts underneath, the ones you've been too busy to notice. And a lot of times those deeper thoughts are kinder than you expected, more forgiving, more wise. The desert creates space for that, enforces it even. You can bring all the podcasts and playlists you want, but eventually you'll hit a spot where there's no signal, where the radio gives you nothing but static, where your only option is to turn it off and drive with your thoughts. And in those stretches, if you're not fighting it, you start to understand that being alone isn't a problem to be solved. It's a gift to be received. The third lesson is about impermanence, which sounds heavy but is actually freeing. Every ghost town in Nevada is a reminder that nothing lasts. The biggest, most successful, most permanent-seeming things eventually crumble. The bank buildings and opera houses and three-story hotels all fell to ruin. The towns that were going to last forever didn't make it past a few decades. The dreams and plans and certainties of thousands of people turned to dust and scattered in the wind. And at first glance, that's depressing. It makes you wonder why we bother building anything or trying anything if it's all going to fall apart eventually. But look at it longer and you realize the impermanence is what makes it matter. Because we only get this one short life, because everything we build is temporary, because none of it lasts, that means the moment is what matters. Not the future, not the legacy, not the permanent mark you leave on the world. Just this. Just now. Just the fact that you're alive and aware and able to feel things. Driving through Nevada at night, past those ghost towns and through that silence, under those stars that are mostly already dead by the time their light reaches you, you start to understand that everything ends and that's okay. That's not a bug, it's a feature. The ending is what gives the middle its weight, its urgency, its sweetness. The fourth lesson is about beauty in unexpected places, about learning to see value in things other people overlook. To most people driving across Nevada, it's boring. It's empty. It's hours of nothing between somewhere and somewhere else. They're impatient to get through it, annoyed by the lack of scenery, frustrated by the long distances between services. But spend enough time here and you start to see it differently. You notice the way light hits the mountains at different times of day, turning them from brown to gold to purple to black. You start to appreciate the subtlety of it, the way the desert rewards attention. You see the wildlife that's adapted to survive here, coyotes and kit foxes and ravens and hawks, sage grouse and pronghorn and wild horses. You notice the plants, how each species has found its own way to conserve water and survive the heat and the cold and the wind. You realize that empty was never the right word. Sparse, maybe, unforgiving, but not empty. Full of life that knows how to survive where survival isn't guaranteed. Full of beauty that doesn't shout but whispers if you're listening. And once you learn to see beauty in the Nevada desert, you start to see it everywhere. In parking lots and industrial zones and parts of cities everyone else finds ugly. Because if you can find something to love about sagebrush and alkali flats, you can find something to love about anywhere. The fifth and final lesson, the one that ties all the others together, is about acceptance. About working with what is rather than fighting for what you wish things were. The desert doesn't care about your preferences or your plans or your complaints. It's going to be hot in summer and cold in winter and windy in spring and impossibly beautiful at dawn, and none of that changes based on whether you like it or not. So you learn to adapt. You carry extra water. You check weather forecasts. You plan around the reality of the situation rather than the situation you wish you had. And that skill, that acceptance without resignation, that willingness to work with the world as it actually is, that translates to everything else in life. Because the world is what it is. Other people are what they are. You are what you are. And you can spend your whole life fighting against those realities, insisting that things should be different, should be easier, should be fair. Or you can accept the hand you've been dealt and figure out how to play it as best you can. The desert teaches acceptance not through words but through experience. Through winter storms that shut down highways whether you like it or not. Through summer heat that doesn't care about your schedule. Through distances that take the time they take regardless of how impatient you are. And slowly, mile by mile, drive by drive, you learn to stop fighting what you can't control and focus on what you can. I'm not saying Nevada made me wise. I'm not wise. I'm just a driver who's crossed the state enough times that some of its lessons sunk in despite my best efforts to ignore them. But I can say this. I'm different than I was 20 years ago. Calmer, more patient, less quick to panic or despair, more comfortable with silence and solitude, more accepting of impermanence, better at seeing beauty in unexpected places. And if you ask me where I learned those things, I'd point you west toward the Silver State, toward highways that stretch to the horizon, toward ghost towns that remember boom times and accept their busts, toward hot springs that bubble up from the earth offering warmth for free, toward skies so full of stars you run out of wishes. Nevada doesn't announce its wisdom, doesn't package it in self-help books or inspirational posters. It just sits there, patient as stone, old as starlight, waiting for anyone willing to slow down and pay attention. And if you do, if you really sit with the silence and the space and the emptiness, eventually it starts to make sense. Eventually the desert stops being just something to drive through and becomes something that drives through you, rearranging your thoughts, settling into your bones, teaching you lessons you didn't know you needed to learn. And that's Nevada, friends. Or at least one version of it, seen through a windshield at night, filtered through years of miles and memories and moments that stick with you long after the landscape has passed. I've taken you down the loneliest road where silence becomes companionship and isolation becomes peace. Rolled you through Rachel and the Extraterrestrial Highway, where the only thing stranger than the stories is the fact that some of them might actually be true. Walked you through Rhyolite and the other ghost towns that remind us nothing gold can stay. Shown you the Black Rock Desert where 70,000 people prove that community can be built anywhere if the intention is strong enough. Soaked with you in hot springs that bubble up from the earth's memory, offering warmth in the harshest places. Driven you down Interstate 80 where the Cowboy Corridor connects coast to coast and teaches patience to anyone who will learn it. But mostly, I hope I've given you a sense of what Nevada really is, underneath the neon and the gambling and the obvious stuff everyone already knows. It's a state that rewards attention, that reveals itself slowly, that doesn't care if you understand it but offers understanding anyway to those who seek it out. Nevada's not for everyone. Some people never get it, never see past the emptiness to what the emptiness contains, and that's okay. The desert doesn't need everyone to love it. It's perfectly content being what it is, whether anyone appreciates it or not. But if you're someone who's ever felt too crowded, too observed, too pressured by the constant demands of modern life, if you've ever wanted to disappear for a while, to find a place where you could just be without anyone watching or judging or expecting anything from you, then Nevada might be what you've been looking for all along. The highways are here, rolling out toward every horizon, carrying whoever's willing to follow them into spaces that feel both ancient and alive, both familiar and strange. The ghost towns stand in their patient ruin, teaching lessons about ambition and acceptance. The hot springs bubble up offering free warmth to anyone who finds them. The stars shine brighter here than anywhere else, reminding us that we're part of something bigger than ourselves. And the silence, that deep, thick, absolute silence that you only find in the true desert, sits there waiting, offering space for thoughts and feelings and realizations that get drowned out everywhere else. I'm heading east now, toward the Nevada-Utah border, toward the next load and the next deadline and the next stretch of highway. But I'll be back. I always come back to Nevada. It's become home in a way that no actual house ever has. The one place where I feel like I can breathe all the way in and all the way out, where the pressure valve releases and the tension drains away, and I remember what it's like to just exist without performing. Maybe you'll find your way out here someday. Maybe you're already here, listening to this as you drive through the darkness with your own thoughts for company. Either way, the desert will be here, patient as stone, old as starlight, ready to teach anyone willing to listen lessons they didn't know they needed to learn. So check your mirrors, top off your tank, make sure you've got plenty of water and a full stomach and something warm in case the night gets cold. And then point your vehicle west toward the Silver State, toward highways that disappear into nothing and everywhere at once, toward silence so complete you can hear the stars burning. The road's out there waiting. Nevada's out there waiting. And maybe, just maybe, the person you'll become on those lonely highways is out there waiting too. Safe travels, friends. Keep the rubber side down and the shiny side up. And if you see me out there on Highway 50 or 375 or I-80, flash your brights in greeting. We're all just passing through this beautiful, harsh, honest, magnificent emptiness together. And that's enough. That's more than enough. That's everything.